We've covered gold management and team compositions. Now, on this episode, we're going to be talking about another very important topic, item combos and synergies.
That's right. Knowing which are the best items and what champions to put them on can be the difference between victory and defeat. This is Teamfight Tactical Report.
What's up, everybody? My name is Jimmy Wong.
How's it? It's Josh Lee Kwai.
On the last episode, we talked about team compositions and team fight tactics and how those can really help you win games. And we got tons of tweets, tons of images. You guys are taking the advice and putting it into action, which is super awesome. So today, we're doing something that's also very important, item builds and who to put them on.
Yeah, I think this is a really big part of the game. And after we've done these three, that's kind of the triumvirate of most important things. If you got gold management, team composition, and items down, now you're really cooking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the infinity edge, right? It's the triangle.
There it is.
Yeah.
There it is. Go ahead.
Yeah, big disclaimer. Riot's still changing a lot of stuff about this game.
They always will be.
Yeah, and they have a public test server as well, and we were going to talk a little bit more about that, but the main thing is that on that test server, items are being moved around a little bit, percentages are changing, so the numbers and the stuff that we say today may not be exactly what they are by the time you listen to this episode, so make sure you follow us on Twitter at TFTactical. That's where we'll keep you updated in case something does change that's significant. Otherwise, just take the percentages and things with a grain of salt. But in general, we try and talk about these items and things broadly on the show so that you get a better understanding of how things work as a whole, as opposed to the minutia of how each item functions exactly.
Yeah, I think most of the information will be evergreen, as we like to say, but it will slide. Maybe what we think is the best item today could be the third or fourth best, depending on what they changed.
True. Oh, and they're adding in the guaranteed item drops in creep rounds now, which is going to be, I think, in the patch coming up soon, but I don't even know when it's coming out.
I don't think it's going to change anything we're talking about today, though. You're still going to want, whatever the best items are on the characters that they fit on.
Yeah.
So we're going to start by covering the basic items, and then we'll talk about the items once you've combined them. I think it's really important, first of all, to say, though, what items you want will change as the game goes on and progresses, and based upon what other items you have and what specific champions and compositions you have, which is why it wasn't appropriate for us to talk about items before we talked about team comps, right?
Right.
So once you know how to build a good team comp, now you can add the item part into the mix and really maximize your chance to win.
Yep. And we're not talking about every single item today. That would result in a very long episode. We're just focusing on the ones that we think are the most important and the ones that you need to keep your eye out for, especially in those carousel rounds and also what you're looking for to drop on the minion rounds.
Yeah, so let's start with the carousel round because that's the very start of the game. That is going to be where you start to make the first decision, and items do weigh heavily into this. I don't know about you. I try and grab Pike, no matter what Pike's got on him. But then if Pike gets grabbed or is not available, now I'm actually like, is there a BF sword I can grab or a recurve bow? Those are my top two.
Yeah, notably Pike is a 2-cost unit, so he's just impossible to get in those first few rounds.
Sometimes,
usually. It's very, very rare. So
the word's out on Pike.
Yeah, the word's out on Pike. Everyone knows. I mean, they actually took Pike's power level down a little bit because he was he's still good. If I can't get a Pike, I'll look for another a champion that could potentially carry my team. Like
a $2 champion.
Yeah, like a Varus is usually very good. So if those options are on the table and you can't find a good champ, then you're looking at the items. And usually you're going to want to find the item that's going to give you the most flexibility moving forward into the rest of the game, which means it has the best build options. And no matter what you take, you can find a way to use that item.
Yeah, so BF sword, the recurve bow are my top two. After that, if there aren't any available or close enough, I'm looking for a spatula.
Yep.
Because an early spatula means you can later combine it with a second spatula and get plus one amount of units available to you on the battlefield.
Yep, or you can make your unit into a different class, which can sometimes make a big difference as well.
And then my fourth choice is a Tear of the Goddess if I don't have access to a good champ I want or those other three items.
Yeah, it's that or the rod for me.
Yeah.
These are sort of interchangeable, and again, this specific list of things definitely going to change in terms of priority as patches come out. But as of right now, we think these are the best 4 items that you can get.
That's in the first carousel, though. That immediately changes based on what else happens in the creep rounds and what other items you get and what your team comp is. Now, the reason we like BF Sword and Tear of the Goddess both among the top 4, I think, is because what I think is probably the strongest item, or at least one of them for sure, is the first combined item on our list, and it's the Spear of Shojin.
Spear of Shojin, another item that was so strong they had to take it down a notch.
And it's
but
still good.
Yeah. So in order to make the Spear of Shojin, it looks like a sort of greenish spear, and you
It's a little confusing because there's 2 items that look like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There's a 25% heal one too.
Yes.
The hex deck. Yeah. So the Bee of Sword and the Tear of the Goddess combined together turn into the Spear of Shojin. And I guess flavorfully it kind of works, right? It's an attack item that's going to give you mana. So it's a sword and a Tear of the Goddess.
Yeah. And what it does is 15% of max mana is gained back on attack after the character's used its ability at least one time.
Right.
A very good item because you start to use your abilities more and more often.
Yeah, and the idea behind this is someone like Pyke, he's going to dash through the rest of their team and stun them, and then he's going to have the chance to start hitting them and gaining that mana back and get back to ultimate quickly. So this item is great on champs, that characters that use stuns, that make people stop, freeze, do whatever it is, because it gives them more time to rebuild the mana and sometimes chain it together and cause a lot of disruption to your opponents. One of the most important things you can do in teamfight tactics is stopping a unit from doing something. If you take their most powerful unit out of the game for 2-3 seconds, that is sometimes the difference between having 3 more of your characters alive than not.
Yep. Yeah, I like what you said there. This is really good on stun characters. So characters like Pyke, Kennen is a good one.
Yep, because his attack is a wide field, but it also slows people and
then
has
stuns
an
them at
effect
the
and
end.
stuns
Yeah.
them, yeah.
And then Cho'Gath is another really good one. Stomps on the ground. Everybody bounces up and gets stunned. And it's like you said, because the stun stops their characters, allows the character with the spear to then get 1 or 2 hits in, and now they're already close to ultimate again, and then they stun them again and do that again and stun them again and do that again, and it can get pretty oppressive.
Yeah.
Especially 2 spears on some of these characters can be almost like
Endless.
no time where their characters are actually doing anything in between, like only 1 swing, then stunned again.
Not to mention, a lot of these stuns oftentimes will interrupt another character's ultimate ability. For instance, I've seen Katarina's start to ultimate and immediately get bounced up, and the impact of that is reduced by a huge amount. So that's very, very important as well. Stuns, I think, as well as CC, crowd control, are just 2 of the more important elements in terms of how to really win fights against other teams that may be more powerful than yours.
Now, one thing we want to talk about with each of these items is what they're weak on. So one of the, I think, the great things about this game and what gives it multiple levels of strategy is that you can't just make a blanket statement like you always want Spear of Shojin.
Right. Depending
on your team comp, there are characters and champs that Spear's not very good on.
In fact, they're actually awful on.
Yeah, so this item is weak on shapeshifter characters or characters that don't have a spell ability. So Nidalee and Gnar, you don't really want to Spear of Shojin on them because after they've ultimated once,
they're never going to ultimate again.
They can't turn into a dragon. Shyvana can only turn into the dragon the one time. So
yeah, she doesn't like double dragon.
Yeah, I mean it doesn't do anything because the spear only starts working after the ability was used.
Yeah. So at that point, you're just looking for. At that point, the Spear of Shojin is just giving them a little bit of damage from the BF sword and a little bit of mana, and that's not worth it.
Totally not worth it.
Yeah.
Other characters don't even have like an ability in the same way. So you've got like Kassadin.
Graves and Vayne. So
Yeah.
these are all characters that have a passive, or their ability is, for instance, Kassadin hacks at people and steals their mana away, but he never ultimates. He's just denying their mana.
If you watch Kassadin, the mana bar never does anything because it doesn't matter. And so any character where their mana bar never starts to fill up is going to be pretty bad, really bad with Spear of Shojin. So there's a bunch of characters where you just don't want this item at all.
Yeah. So again, you want characters that are stunning or doing a large effect that doesn't take long to get to, and that also, if repeated once or twice in the game, is going to make a huge difference. So I've seen it also on late game, people selling their Spear of Shojin champ to put it all in the Nivea.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're just hearing constantly, and then that fight is
the
over.
Whole time.
Yeah.
All right. Our number 2 strongest item on the list is these first 4, they're not really in order.
Yeah, they're
I don't think this is the second most powerful.
And again, that's the beauty of this game. Yeah. In every comp, one of these items might be the best.
Right. But this is one of the best items in our estimation. It's Morellonomicon.
Morelos, as people call it.
Yeah, Morelos. Its components are a needlessly large rod and a giant's belt. And what it does is spells deal burn damage equal to 2.5% of the enemy's maximum health per second. And it also applies on anti-healing debuff. It also applies an anti-healing debuff, so they have trouble healing. for a while. Yeah.
So and that is very relevant a lot of times in the game. Characters will come in like Nidalee's can heal your team, so this is going to stop that from happening. But the big thing is that percentage health burn, and it only activates on spells, so not basic attacks. So you're going to want to find champions that have a persistent or an ability that lasts a while when it happens.
Yep.
So while Cho'Gath would have been great with the Spear of Shojin, his thing only happens once it bounces them up.
Right, like he stomps the ground, and it's not like the ground shakes for a while. Under it. It's just one big bounce, and it, all at once it stuns them. Yeah, so that would just do 2.5% of their max health one time.
Yeah, but what you do want is Spin2win Garen.
Yes.
This is a classic. You can build it from level 1 combo. Garen just sits there and rotates, and every time someone takes a tick of damage from him,
second,
it's an ability, his spell, and so it's also going to deal the Morellonomicon's burn damage.
So they might take 5%, 7.5% of their health extra in damage from Garen.
And you'll see those numbers ticking up. Just pay attention to what happens when a character like Garen does this, and you'll see it in action.
Kennen, who is also good with the Spear of Shojin, and those two, Morelos and Spear, is really strong on Kennen because it is an area effect damage that lasts for a little while, and during that time, their life total just drop down super rapidly. Yeah,
the ability to, again, kill multiple champions at the same time in TFT is very important as well. Because, again, like if you only have 8 units on the board, going from 8 to 7, not so bad. Going from 8 to 6 is actually sometimes massive, because maybe those are the characters you need to proc your buffs or your glacial or whatever it is.
Yeah, and then the last one we're going to mention as just an example of good characters put it on. These are not the only ones, but we just can't talk about them all, is Anivia, because has that big... Yeah. I hate hearing that sound.
Oh, it's
Unless
awful.
I have Anivia, and then I love it.
Yeah. It's like the stereotypical hawk sound they put in all the trailers and movies and stuff. You're like, oh boy.
Kakar!
Yeah. So Morelos is great on these characters. Again, they have an area effect. It's going to trigger and proc multiple times. However, it's really bad on characters that just do one spell when they hit. So, for instance, a Veigar. Super huge blast, but it's also already doing so much damage that 2.5% damage is minimal. So you don't want a character that shoots one thing out.
Yeah, Ashe, who does the stun and does damage. Like, what's another 2.5% of their health that one time? It just isn't worth it to have Morelos.
Yeah, something we should talk about is when you're building an item on someone, you want the item to make their special or their ultimate better by a large amount, by sometimes a 2x factor. Like now Garen's ultimate is 3 times better because he's doing Morelos on someone.
Right.
Ashe's ultimate is good because it freezes someone.
It makes Ashe's ultimate like 10% better?
Yeah.
So
it gives us some damage, but that's not why you're ultimating Ashe. Yeah, exactly.
Not worth it. Also, characters that don't have an ability, really, this is not good. So Kassadin, again, you don't really want to put Morelos on. It won't do anything. Nope. Ashe, again, Vayne, same thing. Vayne has a passive ability, and the mana bar doesn't matter. So, yeah. All right, you want to talk about the number 3 strongest item?
I used to love to build this all the time, and I've actually realized this is a much more specific item than I realized.
Yeah.
It's Ginsu's Rage Blade, and this requires a recurve bow and a needlessly large rod. So you notice that the rod is actually really important to any characters that in general want to do extra plus big time damage, and the Rage Blade definitely does that. So what it does is that the attacks you make grant a 4% attack speed, and this stacks indefinitely. So if a round goes long, you may see someone just going.
It's really good on nobles.
Yeah. Characters that basically have on-hit abilities. So nobles, when they have that noble buff, they're going to gain health and armor back every time they hit them.
And they just tend to last a long time.
Yeah. Characters that have wild buffs all tend to want to gain. They want to gain attack speed in the first place. Either it's Nidalee trying to transform more quickly, and they have the wild buff.
Can just be a beast with this thing on.
Yeah, absolutely. Kassadin, I've seen with this thing on, just tear up a front line.
So this is great with Kassadin because his passive ability or static ability is on hit, right? Steals a little bit of the mana, gets a shield. Well, he's shielding himself more and stealing their mana more when he's hitting more often, so it's really good.
It's going to make him really hard to kill, but the big thing about Kassadin is he's also stopping one of their main characters from using their abilities.
Vayne, every 3rd hit, Vayne does like true damage, and so
clink.
What you want her to do is just hit more often, because that every 3rd hit will come up more often if she's just sort of firing her arrows faster.
Same thing goes for Tristana, who needs to hit them a few times after she ultimates, so as soon as she's using her bullets faster. So you can understand these aren't characters that kind of want to spam their main attacks.
This is also becomes good on characters that maybe it wouldn't otherwise be as good on once they have the Spear of Shojin. So I would put this, I wouldn't want to start with Pike with one of these, but if I manage to get a Spear of Shojin onto a Pike, now I'm much more likely to want a Ginsu Blade, because after he does his ability, now he's going to strike much faster
Yeah.
and get to the ultimate again. And then once he does it the second time, now he's going to strike even faster. And that's how you get into that the permastun type deals.
Yeah, this is really good with the Ranger buff as well. So I've seen
yeah.
Varus go off with this. So again, you're looking for champions here that want to hit a lot of times and very quickly. You're not looking for slow casting champions that may be going slower, because it's gaining this on every single time you attack.
Yeah.
And if you can't even attack that much before the round's over, you're not going to get the max value out of this. So it's actually an interesting balancing point.
I think it's pretty bad on tanks too in general, Kassadin aside, because it works so well with his ability.
Awful on someone like Garen.
Yeah, just because they're not your damage dealers. They're supposed to soak up damage. And so this doesn't help them do that in any way. And it can be sort of, you might feel like you want to do it early game because, oh, my Garen is my strongest character. Hold off.
Yeah.
Don't put it on there. It's just going to be a waste. And unless you're going to want to sell that Garen later, it's going to be stuck there.
Yeah, you also really want to be careful of characters that when they ultimate can't be attacking. So when Garen ultimates, he's taking, let's say he attacks for 10 seconds. He's going to ultimate for 3 of those. That's 3 seconds you're not getting a Ginsu's proc to get it be attacking faster.
That's a really, really good point. All right, let's talk about the 4th strongest.
This is my favorite item.
Yeah. This might be the strongest. I think Spear of Sojin was, they nerfed it a little bit, and now I think this is.
This may just be the most flexible, I think, of all the items, too.
It's really, really good. It's rapid fire cannon. Its components are a recurve bow and a recurve bow.
Making it very hard to make.
So what it says is, the wearer of the rapid fire cannon, their attacks cannot be dodged, and their attack range is doubled. Which is really interesting. Even with a melee unit now, they become a ranged unit.
Right, they're like hitting them from 2 blocks away instead of 1.
But it's also really good on ranged units because suddenly some characters are just shooting across the screen and they never have to move. So one of the things that will sort of hurt your damage efficiency is if your characters are forced to move to attack something. Because that's, like you said with Garen, right? How like some of that time he's not attacking. Well, let's imagine that the fight's going on over here and my Lucian kills the thing next to it and then looks and is like, oh, I got to run all the way over there to start firing again.
Yeah.
And so all that time while they're moving, they're not doing any damage.
Yeah, it's even worse if it's like you fight a 1v1 with a melee character and you watch them like do a whole carousel round around the farm. You're like, let me find my spot. And the character's dead. It's like, well, great. You've done nothing.
7 seconds that character can have done nothing at all, which is huge. Whereas if they have the rapid fire cannon, maybe they're a melee unit and they don't have to find a spot. They can just throw from behind.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's the Lucian and he can just turn and start firing right away. That's a big deal. So this is a good item on a lot of characters, but I think it's the best on your damage carry. Whoever's going to be, we call it carry when they're going to carry the team. They're going to. So Nidalee is a really, really good one.
Yeah, she's already throwing a spear, so she already has a distance that she can throw it at. But usually,
it's short range.
Yeah, and the worst part about shapeshifters is when they die before they're able to do anything. So now you're able to put your Nidalee safely in the back, make sure she ultimates, and when she does, she can keep swiping at people and healing everyone else around her. So it gives her so much more power in keeping her safe by putting her in the back line.
I also think one of the weaknesses of Nidalee is a lot of times you start her in the back line, she throws the spears, turns into the tiger thing, and then has to now get close to them to attack. And so it's like, you get that
you're wasting
3
more time.
or 4 seconds where they're just trying to find their spot. And she doesn't do that anymore. She throws the spear, turns into the tiger, and now maybe steps forward 1 square and starts throwing again.
Sort of hacking them.
Yeah. I really like this on Graves.
Yeah.
This is my favorite.
Blast them from far away.
Yeah, and it still does the
spread damage.
The spread damage, so it's super, super strong to put it on Graves, and he's just like area effect damage.
Yeah.
It's like the shotgun.
Yeah, like Arnold.
I wanted to do an aside here because this is something that our friend Wes, who Smash Gizmo on Twitter, works at Riot, very good gamer. He started posting like these super Graves comps where he'd just be like, Graves becomes his carry, and he would put red buffs on Graves.
Yep, red buffs is amazing.
Red buffs on Graves is crazy. Red buffs does, what is it, 2.5%?
Yeah, it's percent damage on when it hits. So,
but he's area of effect, so you're like doing like 7.5% extra damage. So getting like double red buff and
rapid fire
cannon on Graves is like, he just kills their whole team so fast.
Gunslingers, man.
Yeah.
Slingers.
I can't win with gunslingers as a comp, but I can win with just Graves with all that stuff on it.
You maybe have one other gunslinger if you're going for it, if you're going for the extra hits. But even then, Graves just with those red buffs is pretty powerful. Draven is, I think, the classic rapid fire cannon where from the beginning, it's great because he's throwing axes. And again, a big part of Draven is he has to catch axes sometimes. So if he has a rapid fire cannon on, he doesn't need to move anywhere.
Throwing them all the
Throws
way
the
across
axes and they're
screen.
coming right back at him. He doesn't need to move because he doesn't need to get closer to attack. So Draven, when this paired up with Draven and attack speed turns him into the hyper carry, as we call it. It's not just a carry, it's the hyper carry.
Right. Ashe is another really good one because Ashe's ability actually cares about how far away Ashe was from the target.
Right.
So
Her arrow.
it allows her to be even farther away, which makes the ability more effective. So this is an interesting case. I don't know if there's another character that works in this way with Rapid Fire Cannon where it cares about how far away it is.
Not yet, I don't think.
Specifically, right?
Yeah,
They care because of the amount of damage they're doing, but it doesn't alter how their ability works.
The effect of their ability, yeah. And that's actually mimicking Ashe's ability in League of Legends as well.
Another interesting thing about Rapid Fire Cannon is that there is a comp that sort of relies on making the opponent's attacks miss. So Yordles has a comp. The buff for Yordles is, a chance for your attacks to miss them. Well, this says wearer's attacks can't be dodged. So this means that, if you've got it on your hyper carry is just as effective against Yordles. And that's a huge deal. Turning off their buff.
Yeah, one Draven could tear through the entire Yordle team because they're heavily relying on the fact that you're going to be missing attacks against them in general.
It's like as if you got 6 nobles together and then there was some item that just said they don't actually heal or get any extra life. Like that. Sorry,
a single item can counter an entire comp, so that's the power of RFC.
It also counters another item we're going to talk about in a second, which is Phantom Dancer, which is a very powerful item and one I've been building more and more.
Yeah, Phantom Dancer, very, very good. We'll talk about more in a second. That and Dragon Claw, I think, are two of the most powerful late game items that people need to be aware of.
Well, I mean, we can move into that section now. I believe these 4 items we've just talked about are the 4 strongest items in the game in a general sense. There's other items that are good in specific situations, but these are generally items I'm trying to build, to one degree or another.
I would say I have these items in almost at least one of them.
Not all 4, but like 1 or 2 of them.
Well, some of them may not even pair that well. For instance, if you're building a hyper carry X versus a hyper carry that, you may not need Morelos at all, but you definitely need that rapid fire cannon.
So these next 3 we're going to talk about are something I've been doing more and more, which is trying to counter the top comps in the game. So I'd say somewhere around the 4th round, I start to look at who the top 2 players are in that game, and I'm trying to look at their comps. Often they're assassins or sorcerers. Those are very popular right now. Glacial Elementalist is another big one. And so depending on what they are, I might start to build an item in anticipation of facing off against them as the game goes into the later game.
Or even holding the item that you will need, like one half of the components, being like, I'll pick up the other half in the carousel. So let's not build this item that may be good now, because I'm still winning matches now, but I may lose ones later, and that's what's more important.
So the rapid fire cannon is a good transition because if I saw Yordle composition and it was among the top 2 or so players, midway through the game, I might start building towards a rapid fire cannon, knowing I'm going to have to face that Yordle comp if I want to win this game. Another big comp I see a lot is Assassins.
Yes, I've been seeing this every single game.
I feel like Assassins is among the top 2 comps, in almost every game. Late into the game.
Yeah.
They don't always win, but an assassin comp is almost always in it at, near the end. And the thing is, there are 2 items in the game that kind of counter assassins. One's the first one we'll talk about is not a hard counter, but it does work very well. It's Zephyr.
Yep. So Zephyr is made up with the Giant Spell and Negatron Cloak. And what it does is at the start of combat, it's going to choose a unit that's on the opposite side of the unit that the item is on, or the closest to that. And it's going to banish them. So it sort of picks them up in a little tornado and takes them out of combat for 5 seconds. And
they basically are down 1 character for the first 5 seconds of the battle.
Yeah, and then everyone else engages. So really good against assassins because they're often relying on their hyper carry assassin to jump in there and start wiping out units. But if you get rid of them for that long, you gave your team a little time to build up mana. By the time they jump in, it might be too late.
Also, usually the assassin's comp is 6 assassins, 1 tank. And because of the way assassins work, your team starts to run towards their tank at the beginning of the battle, spreading them out. The assassins jump in the middle, murder everybody. But if you can banish their tank, your characters don't actually see their assassins because they go into shadow form or whatever at the beginning.
Yeah, at the beginning of each round.
So what ends up happening is you lift up their tank, your team goes, well, I can't see any of their units, so they just stand there. And now their assassins jump and engage your front line because they can't get behind you. And so that can just screw up the entire position for them. And they're like, oh, my assassins are attacking your tank. Great.
Yeah, and last person they want to be attacking.
And your carry just knocks them down, and that's it. So that's, I think, how Zephyr can sort of beat the Assassin's comp the best is by lifting up their tank. If they only have 1 tank, a smart player will then go, oh, I need 2 units you can see, and we'll side in like another tank or just anything that so you can only lift up 1, you still see the other, you still run forward. An interesting thing to note about this, because for all the other items we said, well, these are good characters to put the item on. I like to put this item on a champion who is flexible about where it can be positioned on the battlefield, because we're talking about Assassin specifically. This is still a good item against other comps, but you can actually pick, like, if you can be like, oh, it's down near the end of the game, and I'm going to be likely going up against this comp that looks really strong. Can I pick up their hyper carry at the beginning?
Yep.
Where is it positioned on their map? Now I can take my character that has the Zephyr and put it in the corresponding place. And this is a trick that I didn't even know about till recently. If you pick up the character with the Zephyr and drop it back down onto the board, it'll show you a little tornado icon on the opposite side of the board about what tile it's going to banish at the start.
Yep, and if no characters are in that tile, it's going to choose the closest one. I believe it does the closest one to where your champion is.
It's like the inverse of where you're...
Yes, it's basically a mirror image on the other side. But if you look at other players' boards, it'll be the exact match of that tile.
So remember, you can click on the other players' names on the right side.
Or press 3 to cycle through them.
Yep. So a lot of times I'm looking at like the top two because they're the scariest. And I'm like, well, my comp can beat the 4th and 5th place people because it's maybe stronger than theirs if I just position in a generic way. But now I'm looking at like, but if I run into this person, I really need the Zephyr to get this thing.
Yeah. So Zephyr's bad on characters that you're putting other things like Zeke's Herald on, or Locket of the Iron Solari, which are things that affect everyone that's within the vicinity of the item. So you want to put it on. I've put it on Assassins before.
Assassins are great because you don't really care that much where they are. They're going to jump into the fray.
Yeah, and you can move them around. Don't put it on like a Yasuo, because Yasuo needs to be further away from units to use it. So
don't put it on probably like your hyper carry too, because it's always going to be in the back, and so you never want to like move your hyper carry to the front, but sometimes you want the Zephyr there.
Yeah, exactly.
So the other anti-assassin item, and I think an even better one, and this is one where if you manage to build one on the right character, that you can beat the assassins almost every time.
Yeah,
it's the Phantom Dancer.
You're dancing.
The components are a recurve bow and a chain vest. And what it does is give 100% dodge against critical strikes. This is really powerful, and more powerful than it seems, because every champion already has a 25% chance to crit.
That's 1 in 4 attacks you're negating.
So it's 25% chance to dodge, period. And then against assassins specifically, they rely on their crit. Their entire buff is buffing their crit. So they're just hitting you for normal damage is not what is making them strong. It's that when they crit you, they're doing 350% damage. Well, they can't do that to this character that has this. And that's why single-handedly on the right character, this will make it so assassins almost can't beat you.
Yeah, and that's generally, again, like each comp has their own strengths. If you're working against assassins, their main buff is a huge crit on you. So if you're able to stop even that one, I mean, I've seen so many fights go down to 1 hit. If that 1 hit didn't land, it would have flipped the entire thing around. And oftentimes, these items are negating more than just that 1 hit. So that's why these items are so powerful.
I was in a game today where I did my thing around the 4th round, and the top 2 comps, and they were way ahead. They were like 94 and 92, and everybody else is in the 70s or lower. Were both assassin comps. And I was like, I don't care. I'm just going to build Phantom Dancers.
As many as you can.
And I had 2 Phantom Dancers. And whenever I ran against them, they couldn't kill me, because I had 2 characters that were basically immune to their buff.
Yeah. And that, again, gives you just enough time to be able to stop whatever they're trying to do and alter and make your strategy stronger than theirs. Even if they have level 3 units, even if they're stronger than you, these single items can often be the difference between a 2-star unit beating a 3-star unit.
Yeah, I won that game, and I had 0 3-star units, and both of them had multiple 3-star units, because the stars didn't matter when you had the right item against their comp.
Yep. And another item that is also just a straight up comp hoser, not as much as the Phantom Dancer, but still very, very powerful, and something that I expect might change in the future, is Dragon Claw. And this is anti-magic, and as you might expect, you make it by creating 2 Negatron cloaks together. So you have a bunch of magic resist, and this gives you 83% increased magic resistance.
You basically take no
damage from spells. Basically 0.
Yeah.
If someone does 100 damage to you, it comes off as 17. So it's tiny compared to what actually is happening.
Like in that same game today that I was talking about, let's say I clicked up to the top 2, and one was a sorcerer comp. Well, then I would want to build the Dragon's Claw, because the sorcerers have real trouble if you got this thing.
Yeah, I mean, like, so the way that sorcerers win is either an Aurelian Soul blasting your entire back line, or a Morgana ultimating on top of you, or even just characters like Kennen doing a huge ultimate in the middle of your line. It's not physical damage, it's all magic damage. So anti-magic, 83% magic resistant is big game. It's basically Phantom Dancer for all intents and purposes.
Yep. So that's a really important thing I think to mention here is make sure that when you're building items, you're not just concerned about what your comp is. And those first 4 we talked about, that's a big part of the game, of course. Like, what am I trying to do and what's the best item for my team? Consider the entire time also, what are my opponents doing and what are good items against their composition? Look at the top, 1 or 2 people in your pod in your current game.
Even just
and
watch
start
what you're
building
losing
against them.
to.
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh crap, assassins just always murder me or whatever.
Yep.
Every single character can critical strike. Not every single character is going to use magic damage.
That's
so
right.
for that reason, I think Phantom Dancer is still slightly better and has the edge.
Phantom Dance is good in every single game. Dragon's Claw is great in the specific instances where it matters, but it doesn't always matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, there's so much more to talk about items, but we wanted to just give you a really quick breakdown of what we think are the top items as well as how to use them and how to build them. Another thing that we might talk about in the future is how to hold items on your bench and to build them at the right time.
I'm really bad at holding items too long.
Oh, me too. Because the moment I'm like, I can make a Bloodthirster, here we go. I just build it.
I'm the opposite. I'm scared to commit. So I'll be like losing with 6 items on my bench.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, I probably should have at least assembled 1 so I could win some of these battles and not be so low on health.
Yeah, I've lost 1 or 2 games where I had like 50 gold and 6 items because I got taken from like 25 to 0. And I was like, what? I didn't expect to lose that badly. But turns out you need to scale with the game as well. And that's something we can talk about in a future episode.
Don't be a hoarder.
Do not be a hoarder. No. Hoard the right things. But also
spend them.
Use the things you're hoarding. Yeah. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself in a real tough spot.
All right. Make sure you check out our other podcast. It's called The Command Zone. You can find it on youtube.com/The Command Zone Podcast. We also do a gameplay series around Magic the Gathering called Game Nights. Even if you don't play Magic, I would encourage you to check out that show. I think you'll like it.
I think you'll like it a lot. Also, we had an RP giveaway last week if you left an iTunes review of the podcast. Now, keep leaving those reviews because we may do more giveaways in the future. And if you've left a review in the past, you're still going to be eligible. But we're going to announce the winner of the 5,000 RP on Twitter. So make sure you follow along at TF Tactical. That's where we'll tweet from. And Josh is over at Josh Lee Kwai, and I am at JF Wong. Thank you to Sam, Andrew, and maybe me for editing this podcast.
Thank you for editing the podcast.
Yeah.
If it's you, and thank you to Sam and
or
Andrew.
Yeah. Who knows who's doing it, but someone is going to have to do it.
And thank you everybody out there for watching.
See you next time.